For 20 years since our marriage, I thought I had dedicated myself to serving my husband and mother-in-law. However, I was abruptly informed by my husband that we'll be living with my mother and sister from next month. To add insult to injury, my mother-in-law scorned me with, "Parasites from outside should go back to their own home." That's when I finally woke up.
Understood. Then, I'll take my leave.
With those words, I left the house the next day. But as furniture and appliances began to be moved out, and my husband and his family became furious upon hearing that I had moved into a new condo reputed to be worth $2 million, they came storming over. My name is Olivia Brown, 48 years old. I work in the accounting department of an air conditioning company. I live with William, 2 years younger than me, and my mother-in-law, and we have no children. William and I first met when he joined the large real estate development company where I was working. At first, I simply saw him as a modern man, watched by female employees and older male employees alike for his charming looks. But for some reason, William said to me, "Other accountants seem a bit standoffish, but you, Olivia, have a warmth about you, true to your name." He started handing almost all his paperwork to me. However, whether due to his naturally clumsy nature or carefreeness, I often ended up working overtime to correct his paperwork mistakes and last-minute submissions, despite his immediate apologies. Smart, or should I say, quite sly. Though I maintained a pleasant facade, inwardly I felt bitter each time. Yet, when he noticed I was struggling with the office supplies, he would bring me stationery he recommended, making it hard to see his actions as mere flattery. Eventually, I found myself cleaning up after William, wondering if I was also being won over. Our relationship took a significant leap when I fell ill on the commuter train. Perhaps due to the busy season's late hours, I couldn't bear the rush hour crowd and started feeling dizzy. Managing to make it to the company's nearest station, I collapsed on a bench, unable to move, fighting off nausea. Noticing my condition, William ignored my protests about staining his suit and, following the station staff's directions, carried me to the station's medical room. After taking some medicine I had with me, I lay down for a while. Eventually, the dizziness subsided, and after contacting my company again, my supervisor instructed me to go home. Despite my refusal, William was ordered to make sure I got home safely, and I ended up accepting his escort. The next day, after apologizing to my boss and colleagues, I visited William in the sales department to explain and apologize to his supervisor. "I caused you a lot of trouble, and I'd like to do something to thank you."
Well then, how about you treat me to dinner this Friday? It's just before payday, and I'm kinda short on cash.
William's unreserved request made me burst out laughing as I agreed. I had intended it to be a one-time meal, but now that I've gotten my paycheck, "Let me treat you today as a thank you," he said. This pattern of thanking each other over and over somehow led to us being regarded as a couple by those around us. But I was the only one who panicked and tried to deny it. William was nonchalant about it.
"Hey, there's no need to get so worked up denying it. I don't mind,"
he said, and just like that, we were treated as an official couple. 2 years later, when I turned 28, he said, "Maybe it's time we got married." It would probably put everyone at ease. And so, we married. I planned to continue working, but having both of us work at the same company felt awkward, and William wanted me to quit, which I hadn't expected. "You're getting on in years, after all. Wouldn't it be wiser to focus on having children first?" he said, and even my mother-in-law strongly suggested the same, leading me to resign. Moreover, although I had a preference for living areas if we were both working, the conversation about living with William's family came up. William's father had passed away 10 years ago, and since his sister, Mila, married and left home 3 years ago, William and his mother had been living alone. While I expected us to live together eventually since William is the eldest son, the idea of starting right away was daunting. But when it came to William moving out, his mother was vehemently against living separately, fearing she'd be left alone. I was persuaded that it would save on rent, and so we began our life living together at the same time as we got married. Life was peaceful at first. My mother-in-law, a graduate of a prestigious university who married an elite man from her workplace, took pride in Mila, who had also married well. To William, however, she seemed less interested, despite him being her eldest son. Mila, living about 30 minutes away by train in a condo, often begged her mother to help with household chores.
"Mom, please come and help. I'm too busy every day to handle the chores."
Flattered by her beloved daughter's pleas, my mother-in-law would say, "Honestly, that girl just can't manage without me," and dutifully went to my sister-in-law's condo, taking care of all the household chores like cooking, cleaning, and laundry, almost like a housekeeper, not entirely displeased with the arrangement. But there were times when even my mother-in-law couldn't handle everything alone, or when Mila took a day off to enjoy afternoon tea at a hotel with her, and I would be called upon to help. However, my mother-in-law generally didn't interfere much with William and me, making cohabitation smoother than expected. Considering that, helping out at Mila's occasionally didn't seem like a big deal. But one day, Mila and my mother-in-law planned a one-night trip to a nearby hot spring for rest. They asked me to tidy up Mila's house during their absence.
They said it would be bad to inconvenience the husband while they're away, so could you clean and do the laundry, and prepare some meals in advance?
After being given a list of detailed instructions, I saw my sister-in-law and mother-in-law off, then used the key they gave me to enter my sister-in-law's condo and started tackling the household chores as I was told. I efficiently completed the cleaning, laundry, and ironing. But when it came time to store the side dishes I had prepared at my in-laws' house in the fridge, I remembered being told, "Make sure to chill my husband's favorite brand of beer. Otherwise, he gets in a bad mood." However, when I checked the fridge, there was not a single beer bottle. Instead, it was filled with mineral water and beauty drinks Mila drinks every night.
"I should have checked before going shopping,"
I muttered to myself, but it was too late. Reluctantly, I went to the nearest supermarket, but they didn't carry the specified brand of beer. My brother-in-law's preferred beer was a Belgian brand, not as readily available as domestic brands at any supermarket. Initially, I thought, if this store doesn't have it, another surely will. However, after visiting nearby supermarkets and chain drugstores that also sell food, I couldn't find the specific brand anywhere. At the time, map apps weren't widely used, and I was unfamiliar with the stores around my sister-in-law Mila and Owen's condo area. Despite my rushing around, time passed without success in finding the beer. Resigned, I hailed a taxi to the nearest department store and finally found the beer in the liquor section of its basement. By the time I returned to the condo, it was nearly 5 p.m. Just as I thought to put the beer in the fridge and head home, I saw Owen standing in the living room. "Owen, you're home early." As I said this, I began to tidy up the apron and the bag of food storage containers left on the living room sofa, but then Owen confronted me, asking, "What's all this about?" My wife told me we had hired someone to take care of the house. Owen explained that he had initially wanted to bring his mother from their hometown to live together, considering their full-time work schedules.
"Like my wife's family, my father has passed away, and being an only child, my mother has no one else but me. I asked her to live with us in exchange for her help around the house."
However, Mila had argued, "Then I want my mother to come and live with us too. It's unfair and dishonest to favor only your mother." Following discussions, they agreed to hire someone for housework, sharing the cost, instead of relying on their parents. But in reality, they had secretly been calling on his mother and me to do the work. In reality, behind the scenes, my mother-in-law and I were secretly called upon to take care of the household chores. Upon discovering the truth, Owen immediately contacted Mila's cell phone. Fearing trouble, Mila and her mother rushed back from their hot spring trip only to end up in a huge argument with Owen, who demanded an explanation. It turned out that Mila had been using the money meant for household help on her own beauty treatments and leisure time with her mother. Eventually, my mother-in-law apologized, promising to be more careful in the future to settle the matter. However, it later came to light that Mila and her mother had been lavishing an attractive stylist from their favorite hair salon with expensive gifts and going out for drinks after. Given the previous incident, an enraged Owen refused any mediation attempts by his mother, leading to an inevitable divorce. Since Mila and Owen had only been married for about 5 years and their condominium was rented, there were no disputes over property division, and the divorce was finalized without alimony. The divorce and the workplace gossip became too much for Mila, who had been scouted by another company, leading her to change jobs concurrently with her divorce. But even in her new role, she struggled to build her career, taking out her frustrations on me, blaming me for all her life's setbacks.
It's all Olivia's fault. If only you had handled things better, none of this would have happened. You've been the stumbling block in my life.
Misguidedly blaming me, they started to hold me responsible. Moreover, as I was grappling with fertility issues, my mother-in-law mockingly said, "I wanted to see my grandchild, but from such a wicked woman, I could never have loved it. Maybe it's for the best." Overwhelmed by the injustice, I couldn't help but cry. What shocked me more was William's reaction to my tears. "If you're going to cry and regret your sins now, why couldn't you have just done what my sister and mother said? I'm the one who should be crying because of your mistakes." Hearing that, I felt so devastated I almost stumbled. Because William's words meant that, despite everything, he genuinely believed it was all my fault. Essentially, there was no one in this house on my side. Realizing this, I immediately thought of divorce, but having quit my job to become a full-time homemaker, mentioning divorce wasn't something I could easily do. While returning to my parents' home was an option, moving back unemployed and imposing on my brother's family, who lived nearby, seemed unbearable. Plus, finding a job in the countryside that could support me was likely an insurmountable challenge. So, I resolved to endure the bitterness and focus first on securing my financial foundation. I quietly found a part-time accounting job using connections from my previous employment, convincing my mother-in-law and William by tearfully arguing. "I can't bear being a stay-at-home wife when we're struggling to have children. Let me at least work part-time to help with the finances." Granted permission, I started working the following month. Despite knowing any lapse in household duties would invite scorn and possibly demands to quit my job, I persevered, pushing through fatigue and illness, refusing to compromise at work, and seizing every opportunity to improve. Of course, I made no compromises at work either, seizing every chance to improve, however slight, and continued to strive without missing any opportunity. This effort paid off when I was promoted to a full-time position within 2 years and, 5 years later, joined my current company at the invitation of a former supervisor, continuing to work hard. Then, one day, 20 years into our marriage, after dinner as I was washing dishes, William came into the kitchen and asked me to join him in the living room for a talk. It was unusual for him to seek me out, as he typically enjoyed his time with his mother, ignoring whatever I did around the house. Entering the living room, before I could even sit down, William abruptly announced, "This is already decided. Next month, we're going to live with my mother and sister." To my astonishment, his mother added, "My daughter says she needs to recuperate at home due to overwork at her new job. It's best if she recovers here, and we don't need an outsider freeloading off us." She then approached me, saying disparagingly, "A parasite like you should go back to your own home," gesturing dismissively as if shooing me away. My mother-in-law and William were smirking at me, trying to gauge my reaction, but inside I was thinking, this just saved me a lot of trouble, and I couldn't help but smirk to myself. Then, turning to both of them, I smiled slowly and said, "I understand everything you've said. So, I'll be leaving tomorrow afternoon," and with that, I retreated to my room, leaving the two of them looking as dumbfounded as I had been earlier. The next morning, after seeing William off to work, I waited for the second-hand goods buyer I had contacted the night before. My mother-in-law, unaware of what was happening, was taken aback by the sight of the unfamiliar men, but we quickly got to work regardless. From the kitchen, we started with the refrigerator, oven range, dishwasher, rice cooker, my mother-in-law's favorite soda maker, the dining set, and of course, the IH cooking heater wasn't forgotten. Next in the living room, we listed the TV, air conditioner, the diligently working robot vacuum cleaner, the AI speaker, the off-season hot carpet, and the sofa set for pickup. Then, the fully automatic washing machine, William's room's PC desk and bookshelf, and also the air conditioners, beds, dressers in my mother-in-law and William's rooms were quickly appraised. As the buyer began making a call, my suddenly aware mother-in-law rushed over in a frenzy.
"Hey, what do you think you're starting here? Invading people's bedrooms like this?
she scolded in a shrill voice. I calmly responded, well, as the so-called parasitic outsider, I thought I'd at least take care of my own possessions before making my exit. Just then, the buyer's reinforcements arrived. In no time, the listed furniture and appliances were being carried out of the house. Overwhelmed by the efficiency of their work, my mother-in-law could only pace around anxiously. After removing all the room's LED lights as a final touch, the workers quickly left. Left behind were only William's PC placed directly on the floor, the bedding for the beds, and a pile of my mother-in-law's cosmetics. My mother-in-law once again snapped, "Wait a minute. You think you can do this and just get away with it?" I simply replied, "The rest will be handled by my lawyer." And with that, I took the carry-on bag I had packed the night before and left my in-laws' house. A week later, William, my mother-in-law, and my sister-in-law Mila, having been contacted by the lawyer I hired, rushed to the lawyer's office on the same day. When I arrived late, I was immediately met with shouts of indignation, calling us here and then showing up late, what a disgraceful woman. But when the lawyer sharply stated, "We did not summon you here. You showed up unannounced immediately after we informed you that future negotiations would go through us," William instantly became subdued. Then, as if seeking revenge for her son, my mother-in-law stepped forward aggressively. "Now that we're face to face, let's talk. After you left like a thief in the night, you surely can't expect to come back unless you're willing to grovel and show remorse." She said all this in one breath, glaring at me. Mila and William were also nodding vigorously beside her. They must think I'll jump at that offer without a second thought. What wishful thinking. At my signal, the lawyer smoothly began. "Of course, Olivia has no intention of returning. The discussion moving forward will revolve around signing the divorce papers, property division, and alimony." The trio, surprised by these words, burst out, "Divorce? Property division and alimony? How dare you," creating an unbearable racket. When things became uncontrollable, the lawyer cleared his throat menacingly to quiet them down. But as I calmly stated, divorce is a settled matter. If you do not agree, we are prepared to go through mediation or even court. They began to raise their voices, about to protest again. However, they quieted down once more when the lawyer cleared his throat again. After some whispered discussions, they reluctantly signed the divorce papers presented to them. However, when the conversation turned to property division and alimony, their attitudes soured again. "Property division? The nerve! You were just leeching off William with your petty part-time earnings. I should be the one receiving alimony for having to deal with such a failure of a wife. I won't pay a dime." They began to hurl insults. That's when I pulled out the last 5 years' household budget and copies of the bank statements I used for managing expenses. Initially, William and my mother-in-law didn't understand what was going on, but as the lawyer explained with the copies in hand, their faces grew pale. It turned out I had been the one covering nearly all living expenses, amounting to about $6,400 a month over the last 5 years. "Impossible. I've been contributing $3,000 a month to our finances," William protested, but against his $3,000, the monthly repayment for his and my mother-in-law's credit cards was nearly the same at $2,840, effectively making his contribution null. Effectively, even though money was deposited from the salary account, it just went in one side and out the other. In exchange, the $6,400 deposited from my salary account was merely covering the remodeling loan, William and the mother-in-law's credit card loans, groceries, utilities, and all appliance loans. For the past 5 years since Olivia took the position of accounting manager at her current company, she has been redirecting almost all of her income to the household expenses. The total amount comes to about $380,000. To call someone who has contributed so much a parasite, isn't that quite the treatment? The three of them were flipping through the copies with wide eyes, but what the lawyer stated was an undeniable fact. Realizing their disadvantage, the mother-in-law suddenly softened her tone. "Hey, Olivia, we were once wife and husband, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and sisters-in-law. Shouldn't we stop fighting and peacefully go our separate ways?" Her voice was smooth as silk. Sensing victory, I replied, "Indeed. Besides, I impulsively sold all our furniture and appliances the other day. Let's both act like adults and part ways amicably." Saying that, I asked the lawyer to draft the divorce agreement. We explicitly stated in the agreement that both parties would waive rights to property division and alimony. Additionally, to ensure everything was ironclad, we went to a notary office to have the agreement officially notarized, then parted ways with a handshake, ending our 20-year marriage. However, that wasn't the end of the story. 2 months later, my phone was bombarded with messages from the mother-in-law and William on the only social media account I hadn't blocked them on. Initially, I ignored them, but the incessant notifications became unbearably annoying. Hearing they were even showing up at the lawyer's office demanding to see me, I decided to meet them one last time to officially end this chapter. I arrived a bit early for the scheduled meeting, but William and the others were already there, seemingly more agitated and poorly dressed than before. Upon seeing me, William immediately barked, "Is it true you bought that luxury apartment by the station that costs over $1 million?" I did choose a property not affiliated with William's company, but as they say, a snake always finds its path. They must have heard about it from somewhere. And then the mother-in-law also raises her voice in anger, supporting William. "Where did you hide such money? If it's property acquired during the marriage, it's supposed to be communal property, you cheater." Good grief, what a noise. I reminded the two, who were agitated, of the existence of the notarized documents stating that we had mutually agreed to renounce our property division. It seems they had completely forgotten anything inconvenient to them. William and my mother-in-law turned pale momentarily but quickly recovered and started barking again. That's the same as being deceived. The one who hid it is to blame, obviously. This time, my lawyer took over and crisply explained, "The funds used to purchase the apartment Olivia bought came from the capital gains realized by exercising the stock options she received upon joining her current company. These were gratuitous stock options and do not fall under securities that could be divided as marital property. If you still wish to claim rights, we'll see you in court." However, my mother-in-law still aggressively said, "Oh really? If that's your attitude, we'll see you in court for anything. Then, I will also formally request alimony from you. Considering how openly you were searching for a new spouse even before our divorce was finalized, the psychological damage was significant." This statement visibly paled my mother-in-law. Turning to my sister-in-law, who sat dumbfounded beside my mother-in-law, I stated firmly, "Of course, I'll also be claiming compensation for the mental anguish you've caused me. After your divorce, the barrage of insults and harassment you've directed at me has been thoroughly documented." As I laid out a voice recorder, USB drives, and printed screenshots of messages, my sister-in-law's face turned a ghastly pale. For the final blow, I smiled sweetly and said directly to my sister-in-law, "By the way, you're familiar with Amelia Williams, aren't you? She's actually the daughter of my immediate superior." As I maintained eye contact, her complexion turned even paler. In the midst of this turmoil, I had briefed my current employer's senior management to a certain extent about the situation and sought their advice. It turns out, my boss, Executive Williams, has a daughter named Amelia. She's a bright and lovely young woman I've met several times at company BBQs and other events. However, Amelia has been on medical leave due to mental health issues, exacerbated by relentless harassment from her superior at the company where she started working after graduate school. And that superior was my sister-in-law. After my boss and Amelia's mother divorced when Amelia was in elementary school, they've had no contact with each other since then. So, when Smith asked if I could spend some time with Amelia, helping her with shopping and meals for a change of scenery, I was more than willing to help. While most of our conversations revolved around listening to Amelia's experiences, I was stunned when my sister-in-law's name came up. At the same time, I found out that my sister-in-law's supposed medical leave was a complete lie. In reality, her treatment of Amelia had become a problem at work, and she was under a home standby order. This was bad news. I had to rush into preparing for a divorce as soon as possible. Because if my sister-in-law were to be demoted or fired, she would undoubtedly come to live with us at the in-laws' house. Then, it was clear that I would be put in an even more difficult position, both financially and mentally. As I was pondering how to initiate a divorce in my favor, being ousted by William and his mother turned out to be a blessing in disguise. I went to the trouble of conspicuously selling off the furniture and appliances first. The creation of a fair settlement agreement relinquishing claims to property division and alimony was, of course, due to the employee stock options I had. Given William and his mother's wastefulness had left us with hardly any savings, a strict division of assets would have resulted in me shouldering the majority of the costs. And without any substantial assets, winning an alimony judgment would guarantee nothing. Hence, it was necessary to play up the living expenses card before waiving the property division to make sure I came out on top. Finally, William, his mother, and his sister came to realize everything. The foolish trio, who thought they could continue their lives as usual without me, the parasite, and not need anything else, trudged away with their shoulders slumped. The downfall of the three of them afterward was severe. Following my eviction, the mother wasted no time in spreading word among friends, relatives, and even mere acquaintances that despite not showing us our grandchild's face, she insists on working part-time. I'm determined to cut ties with such a daughter-in-law and my son. She didn't stop there but also hinted, so, if you happen to know any suitable young ladies, I'd very much like to arrange a meeting for my son. Of course, among those approached, people with good sense reportedly sneered behind the mother-in-law's back, saying, even so, looking for the next partner before even divorcing the current wife? Isn't that absurdly out of touch? Moreover, to impose such conditions, how highly does she think of her son? The conditions that the mother-in-law set for William's ideal wife were outrageous. Firstly, she must be in her early 20s. Anyone older would have too much of society's stench on them, starting all that nonsense about equality in marriage, right? She supposedly blurted out. This alone was shocking enough, but the mother-in-law's rampage didn't stop there. Of course, she'll have to sever ties with her own family, but before that, we'll need a pre-transfer of inheritance, so some wealth and financial power are necessary. And, can she be checked by a doctor beforehand to ensure she can bear children? She went on, causing listeners to recoil in horror. And without noticing the cold stares around her, she concluded with, and naturally, being tall, stylish, and beautiful is a given, so please take care of that. Not surprisingly, no suitors came calling to the mother-in-law's door, and out of desperation, she bombarded people with calls and messages asking for matrimonial prospects. But she was either politely refused with unfortunately, we don't know anyone who meets those criteria, or simply ignored. Eventually, as the saga of the divorce spread from relatives to friends and neighbors, they became the subject of whispers, labeled as the shameful mother and son. Having behaved arrogantly until then, the harsh judgment they now faced was too much to bear, leading to them shutting themselves in at home, avoiding the outside world. From inside their house, the mother-in-law's screams, shouts, and the sound of breaking dishes started to be heard frequently, becoming the subject of gossip. Previously, whenever frustrated, the mother-in-law would take it out on Olivia or dissipate it through wasteful spending. Now, without Olivia as a scapegoat and unable to indulge in shopping or short trips for stress relief, she might be lashing out at home. Meanwhile, William had been dumping all household financial responsibilities on me since we got married. He seemed to have no clue about managing finances. Even after the lawyer explained it clearly, he arrogantly assumed, if she could come up with the living expenses, then I can easily do it too if I set my mind to it. However, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, who were supposed to take over the household chores for me, just abandoned everything, finding it too bothersome. Meals were all either delivery or ready-made from the department store's basement, and they only relied on housekeeping services for cleaning and laundry. Everything else was just as you'd expect, leading to a financial breakdown in just 2 months. The credit card I had given my mother-in-law for living expenses was quickly confiscated, and meals were reduced to toast and coffee for breakfast, instant noodles for lunch, and discounted items for dinner. Laundry was done all at once only when they ran out of clothes to wear, and cleaning was done only where it was visible. It's likely that the consequences of a nutritionally unbalanced and unsanitary lifestyle caught up with him. William, who was once praised for looking younger than his age, gained an unhealthy amount of weight, his skin broke out, and his hair became greasy, losing his once handsome aura. Apparently, he became unsuitable for his client-facing sales role due to his uncleanliness, leading to a barrage of complaints from clients. As a result, he was moved to a back-office job, his salary was cut, and he started sending emails and calls to the lawyer saying, "I've seen the light. I was deceived by my mother and sister. I want to cut ties with those toxic relatives and start over." But as per our previous agreement, the lawyer firmly refused any communication, warning that any attempt to approach my workplace or new home would be reported to the police, effectively ending any further contact. Amelia, the other key player in this saga, was furious upon hearing everything from me, exclaiming, "What is that all about? I thought Mila might have learned something from our situation." Blaming her divorce on Olivia and continuing such harassment, she really is that kind of person at heart. After contacting her company, where she had been on leave, to express her intention to resign, she was called in and asked about the reasons for her decision. There, Amelia declined by saying, "This is a personal matter and doesn't directly relate to company operations." However, she then went on to spill everything about this incident to Human Resources and Administration. After ensuring that those present were taken aback by her story, Amelia stated, "Even regarding my own situation, there must have been areas where I was not perfect. I had hoped we could come together, learn from each other, and strive for the company's betterment if there was genuine remorse. However, I cannot see that happening." She firmly declared this before submitting her resignation, adding, "Working under her again would be a mental health hazard for me." Amelia smoothly transitioned into resignation. She was able to find a new job at a competing company that allowed her to work remotely until she fully recovered. Inside her former company, everyone was reportedly shocked to learn that Amelia, who had been on leave, suddenly resigned. Rumors circulated that the reason for her resignation was the continuation of Mila's harassment even outside the company, leading to an uncontrollable situation. Among the juniors and colleagues who admired Amelia, known as one of the leaders among the young staff, many started to consider their future and consequently left the company for new opportunities. Seeing the significant loss of promising young talent, the company's senior management hastily convened discussions and reportedly issued a final ultimatum to Mila, stating, "After your home standby period is over, you will be transferred to a subsidiary in another state. We only want to hear yes as an answer." Despite Mila's resistance, claiming the punishment was unfair, she was subtly threatened with dismissal and reluctantly transferred to a regional subsidiary. Upon arrival, she found that rumors had already spread, leading to her complete isolation, with no one, not even for work-related conversations, willing to engage with her. Desperate, she reached out to William and her mother, only to be harshly rejected and blamed for the situation. "We don't need an unemployed person coming back here. Who do you think caused all this?" "Exactly. You were the real plague, the true parasite," she was told. Now, she continues to work in obscurity at the subsidiary, shunned by everyone. Meanwhile, after finalizing my divorce from William and wrapping up the entire ordeal, encouraged by Amelia, I remarried Mr. Smith, the executive, after about half a year of living together. Despite my initial reluctance, considering my 20-year marriage with William, Amelia convinced me by saying, "I know I'm his daughter, but marriage can be a wonderful thing depending on the partner. Dad might be older, but he's a real catch." Indeed, I found more happiness and laughter in this short time with Mr. Smith and Amelia than in the decades with William. Having the freedom to live authentically and share that with a partner is truly a blessing. Sometimes, I think if only I had made the decision sooner, I might have some regrets. But dwelling on the past and wasting the time that remains seems far more wasteful. Moving forward, I'm determined to cherish the peaceful life with my new husband and daughter.